Hi everyone, I'm John Scholte, pastor of Christian Education and Discipleship at RB Community Church, and I do the Saturday devotions. And today I've been doing a little off-roading with my truck, and I came across a little ranch or farm called No Boundaries. I think it's a hemp farm. No boundaries, and I started thinking about that. Our society and culture really likes the idea of no boundaries whatsoever. I mean, if you Google in, you'll see a lot of things that come up under no boundaries. It's a pretty popular kind of idea. I mean, when I Googled it out, I found that there were a whole clothing line for men and women called No Boundaries. Now, personally, I like to have a little boundaries on my clothes, but anyway, that's the idea. Also, another thing that came up was a podcast. Two guys that are kind of rough around the edges and might go beyond boundaries, but they'll still entertain and inform you. I've never heard the podcast, but that's the idea behind it. Not too long ago, when I was going to teach a class on popular music, I interviewed a music industry executive, and I asked him about that. I said, even in the music industry, there's just so much about no boundaries. And he said, well, that's because the music industry is very competitive and everybody's trying to, get noticed. And so if they don't have boundaries, that just kind of sets them apart. But then as more and more people don't have boundaries, they have to do more and more incredible, crazy things to be noticed. Well, I walked away from that thinking, yeah, so actually, there's so many people that are wanting to be no boundaries that it's so crowded that you've got to somehow stay outside the crowd, right? You have to be outstanding in the crowd. How do you do that? Well, here's one idea. Maybe you should be somebody with boundaries. I mean, if everybody doesn't have any boundaries, then they're all alike. No one's standing out. But maybe if you have boundaries, you'll actually be the one that stands out. Well, as Christians, of course, we serve a God who is a God of boundaries. We see that in our scripture this morning for Psalm 119, verse 117. He says, my statutes, they're the guiding force. Statutes are boundaries, but they keep me safe. Isn't that interesting in the Christian life? A lot of people think that's bad. I mean, when you talk to somebody about our God and that He is a God of boundaries, they see it as a bad thing. But in reality, this God who created us, who knows all the good points and bad points about us, who knows the world, its goodness and not so good stuff, and He wants to protect us from those bad things so that we can have peace and health and wholeness in our lives. So He puts boundaries around us that enable us, because He knows what's right for us, because He created us, so that we wouldn't experience those bad things that happen or come about in our lives. So if we follow His statutes or His boundaries, good things will begin to happen. That's something to think about. It might be that the thought for the day is really that we can be outstanding in our field by simply living a life within God's boundaries. It makes us totally different than everybody else. I think that's a good idea. I think that's something to ponder. Let's follow God's statutes, shall we, this week, and then know that in that we'll be healthy and whole. Hey, thanks for listening, and I will see you next Saturday.